I'd like to welcome everybody to the Medical Marijuana and Wellness webinar series. Tonight's topic is anxiety, stress, and medical marijuana. And I have to say, out of the webinars that we do, this is one of the ones that not only gets a lot of attention, but I think probably does a lot to help many, many people. When you look at the number of people that use medical cannabis, anxiety and stress is in one of the top 5 reasons that people do use medical cannabis. So hopefully tonight we can help you understand what medical cannabis can do to help you with anxiety and stress and really take a lot of the mystery away. I have to tell you that we are here to really answer your questions. So please feel free to ask questions. In a second, I'll show you where to ask those questions. But in the meantime, I would like to introduce my co-host tonight, a lady that I had the pleasure of meeting this week, and someone I think who understands medical cannabis, anxiety and stress, and how to help it. Liz Bohn. Liz, tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do?
Hello, everybody. Well, thank you so much, Marc, for having me tonight on your webinar. I've been skimming through your videos and I've learned so much just by watching your videos. It's just great basic knowledge to the more extensive knowledge that cannabis patients or just future patients need to know. So I'm excited to be a part of it. Thank you so much. So my name is Liz and I am a huge advocate for plant medicine. I myself have been plant-based for almost 7 years. So healing through plants and nature's medicine, that we were just naturally given at our fingertips is truly my passion, and just living the lifestyle has really helped me learn just by, doing it myself. And, I'm really excited to be a part of the cannabis community because cannabis is a plant and it's loaded with medicinal, properties and benefits. And we'll talk more about that tonight.
And you're a community educator with Move.
So right? I am with Move by Verano. So my goal is to take care of a wide range of doctors and cannabis clinics all throughout Central Florida. So I go in there and I educate them on cannabis, all the way from just the basics, which they usually of course know, all the way down to our product and what makes our product from Move so unique and stand out, and why they should recommend our product to their patients. So I learn something every day, and I hope to spread the light to every office and doctor that I come in contact with. So it's great. I love it, and I'm just really excited to be part of this community.
Let's talk about anxiety, stress, and medical cannabis, if that's okay. Let me share a slide presentation. Let me sure I get the right one here. So tonight's webinar is actually being live streamed on Facebook, and so if you have friends on Facebook, they can actually watch the webinar tonight. I do want to tell you that as a follow-up to this webinar, you will be getting an email that has a copy of the video and link to the video on YouTube. It has a copy of the presentation and the resources that we use tonight to put this program together. A few housekeeping issues. If you kind of look down over here, you'll see a little button that right in here that actually looks like 2 little cubes there. It's a Q&A button. Please feel free to ask questions. There is no such thing as a dumb question. Cannabis is such a new topic that it's really interesting to really get people to be able to get an area where they can get their questions answered, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. There is a chat button. You can, I guess, submit questions through the chat, but we pay a lot of attention to the Q&A button as we're doing the online webinars. So Liz, let's talk about anxiety and stress, and what I like to do is really define what they are. So once we get the basic, then we can talk about how we can treat them. Stress is really something that's both a physical and a mental response to an external source. What we find is that stress is something where our body and our brain really respond to some sort of a challenge. And by the way, not all stress is bad. Some of it acts as a motivator. I know that, and I'll use myself as an example. In my life, I have played sports. I played professional sports for a number of years, and I was able to use that stress prior to playing as a motivator to actually play well. I actually played better under stress than I did just practicing. I don't know why, but it just seemed to work well. But I think it also works as an intimidator too. Stress is something that can really overwhelm you. That's something to be careful of. Now, what is anxiety? Anxiety is the ongoing or escalation to a stress response. It's both physical and it's mental. It's something that's a persistent, in many cases with anxiety, people who live with anxiety live with a persistent feeling of apprehension or dread. And that's really not a lot of fun. I do want to say, though, and you take a look at these slides, if you look at the number of people in the world that have anxiety, it's estimated there's over 240 million. So if you do suffer from anxiety, you're not alone. And here in the United States, an interesting statistic that we ran into is that it's over a lifetime, 31% of adults will have some sort of an anxiety disorder. That's 1 out of 3 people in the country. So what I'm trying to point out is it's not something to be ashamed of or hide. It's something to address. It's something that's out there. It's something that's normal, but obviously something that has to be addressed in order to be able to make you feel better or let you feel better and to be able to really enjoy the life that you really want to live. Now, the question becomes, why is cannabis such a big deal? What makes cannabis somehow something magic with respect to helping with anxiety and stress? Well, a lot of people have heard of the nervous system, and the nervous system is something that we have in our body. We've heard about it since we were growing up. The medical profession has talked about it for a long time, and I tend to look at the body's nervous system as the cell phone system of our body. When something happens, it telegraphs to another part of your body that what's happening, and also it tells the brain you have a problem, and so the brain can then take a look at what it can do to address it. What's fascinating is that if you have a problem and your nervous system says, Houston, we have a problem, what does Houston do with it? And what's fascinating is it wasn't until the 1980s and the 90s that the scientific community discovered the endocannabinoid system, which is a system that exists in every mammal. It exists in our body. It's parallel, and it works in concert with the nervous system. So when you have a problem, whether it has to do with pain, it has to do with metabolism, it has to do with your immune system, your nervous system, what your endocannabinoid system does is it then takes over. It processes what they call endocannabinoids, and this is where your body tries to keep itself in balance. That balance we call homeostasis. So it's something that helps you really process pain, anxiety, memory, appetite, inflammation, your immune system. This is the part of your body that is regulating your system to keep yourself in balance and also to help yourself heal. And that's what's fascinating, is that we're just discovering this. And the most important thing about this is that the endocannabinoid system plays a huge role in helping us with anxiety, with fear, and with stress response. It's a lot of studies, which we'll talk about in a little bit, have really shown the effectiveness of the endocannabinoid system as addressing anxiety and stress. A lot of people who suffer from PTS obviously have used cannabis, and the cannabis actually helps with anxiety-related symptoms that are out there. And the terpenes, which we'll talk about that are in cannabis, really help to boost the anti-anxiety effects that are out there. And that's something that's really, really important. We've also found out in the last couple of years in a study that was published in the year 2020 that we also have a cannabinoid in our system called 2-AG, and that is specifically linked to anxiety-reducing connections in the brain. So we're discovering a lot about the endocannabinoid system and how effective it is to really help us maintain our balance that's out there. Liz, you have products, for example, terpenes, that Move has used in order to be able to address these conditions. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a cannabis guide. Actually, I have it right here. I can show you later on in the presentation, but we have this amazing guide filled with, key points and just really great information for new patients, for, previous patients that, go through a lot of great points about cannabis. But we do have a terpene profile sheet. I'll just briefly show you what it looks like. But we have, for example, we'll go through it, later in the slides, but all the major terpenes, all the potential effects that they have, all the strains that we carry that they're found in, and then all the natural plants that they're also found in as well.
So the question I have for you, Liz, is how do we get a copy of that?
How do we get a copy of that? So if you go, most MMTCs in Florida should have the cannabis guide. I mean, that is our goal throughout all of Florida, to provide every single doctor's office, cannabis clinic with these guides, and also a couple other really great materials that we do offer as well.
So we can get it from your clinic, and we can get it from the doctor that we got our card from. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can go to the clinic, get it from your doctor.
Cool. Is there an online version?
There is an online
Why don't you take that as a question and get it answered, and we'll take a look at that. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on our website about all
Sure.
of the cannabis education. So there is education very similar. I don't know about it identical to our cannabis guides, but you can find everything on our website for sure.
Now, what we have found is in looking at the research and looking at cannabis is that a couple of the major cannabinoids in cannabis, CBD and THC, have been proven very, very effective when taken together. In other words, when you use both of them together, they're taken together, they actually are very effective at being able to address and to be able to help you manage anxiety and stress, especially anxiety. Now, what's interesting, and this is something that's very, very important, when you take low doses of cannabis, meaning that you go low and you go slow and say a little bit of it, what it does is it helps you with your anxiety and stress. And in many cases, it helps you with pain because it helps reduce the inflammation, especially CBD. When you take high doses of things like THC, it can take you over the threshold of helping you with your pain reduction and can actually start creating and causing anxiety. So there's a place in which we have what they call your optimal effect of being able to use how much cannabis. Taking more is not necessarily better. What's important, and we'll talk about dosing later on in the presentation, is to start low and go slow and then find out where that optimal place for your relief is. And if you then pass that, you'll start getting a little more anxious, then just back down to your dosage and you'll be able to find that optimal dosage. The objective is for you to be able to address your condition without getting higher, without getting anxious. Now, I do have to point out CBD, you can take higher doses of CBD. It does reduce anxiety and it does reduce inflammation. So CBD is also a very, very powerful and very important tool. THC helps. And so using them together, actually, 1 and 1 is 3. But be careful of using too much THC because it can actually work in the opposite effect. I tend to look at cannabis as something as what I call it's a whole medicine cabinet. When I am asked about it, it's interesting that cannabis has 450 medical properties that we know of. There are 120 cannabinoids that are being studied and 100 terpenes that are being studied. And by the way, there are over 200 cannabinoids that we know about and over 200 terpenes that we know about, but not all of them are being studied. This plant has a number of medical properties, and that's what makes it so unique. There is no plant on this earth that is so rich in medical properties that help mammals, that help us as human beings, as cannabis. And what's interesting is in the process of being able to use a couple of these cannabinoids together, meaning putting those things like THC and CBD together, we call that the Entourage Effect. In other words, 1 and 1 is 3. If you take CBD by itself, it will help with inflammation. It will help with pain and anxiety, or stress and anxiety. But if you use a little bit of THC, it almost puts it on steroids. In other words, it does, it actually pumps it up. And that's what's called the Entourage Effect, that 1 and 1 is 3. And that's where a lot of doctors have a little difficulty because really it's something that in most medicine, in the Western medicine, you take one pill for one condition at one time. Where in our world, in the cannabis world, what we're doing is we're actually putting cannabinoids together because they feed off each other to enhance the healing property. Liz, your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, the endocannabinoid system is magnificent. It is, body-wide. It affects every single system in the body. So that just goes to show that it's not just working on one singular system, it's working, synergistically, just like when you use multiple cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids all in their natural, main component, it's going to really elevate all of those medicinal properties. So it's exciting to learn more and more about that.
And what's fascinating is when we look at all the different, this slide over this little graphic over here comes from Normal, and it's actually got a guide, a 77-page guide that goes with it that talks about each of those conditions and medical cannabis and how it helps in that particular condition. So it's very, very, very fascinating. Now, what do we know about endocannabinoids? Well, what we do is we know that in cannabinoids, our body, so we look up here, we produce endocannabinoids. Your body, when you have an issue, says, Houston, we have a problem. What it does, it produces endocannabinoids and it distributes those endocannabinoids to that part of your body that needs help. Whether it's inflammation, that you hurt your knee, you hurt with pain, whether it's your indigestion, whether it has to do with your anxiety, your brain. this is where your body says, I know I have a problem, and I'm going to produce the medicine it needs to address it. And that medicine is called endocannabinoids. What we have found with cannabis is cannabis produces what they call phytocannabinoids. And those phytocannabinoids are the exact same structure that the endocannabinoid has. In other words, what it's doing is you're actually producing, the plant is producing something that mimics our endocannabinoid system almost perfectly. Now, the way our body works is we store endocannabinoids in our body, and when we have a problem, your body will then release them and then produce more of them to be able to address that situation. As we get older, and I'll use myself as a senior citizen, I don't produce endocannabinoids like I did before. So being able to use phytocannabinoids to put those into your body, in essence, I'm charging that battery, so when I do need it, it's ready to produce. And that's what makes cannabis so interesting, is it is very natural. It almost mimics your body, and it's something that works. 1 and 1 is almost 3 in this particular situation. And that's what's really got a lot of people very, very interested in the medical properties that this particular plant has. Now, I'm going to divert for a second. When I talk to a number of people, they actually always ask me, why do these cannabis plants have all of these I see these funky little plants that look kind of like alien creatures. And at the end of it, they have these little trichomes that are out here. The reason that they show these is because these trichomes, this is where the cannabinoids and the terpenes are all stored, in those little teeny trichomes that are out here. So when you hear about cannabis, really a lot of the potential of the plant is stored in these particular properties down here. So when they're showing, when cannabis growers are showing their plants, they're showing the trichomes, they're showing what kind are there, and the different colors actually dictate the different terpenes that are in that particular plant. So I thought I'd point that out. That's a kind of a fun fact that we have on the side. But let's talk about entourage for a second. Tell me a little bit about the entourage effect, because, for example, if I'm taking CBD, if I'm learning how to dose, and I'm worried about getting too much THC where I actually get high or get anxious, I can use CBD. If I take an equal amount of CBD to THC, that actually lessens the psychoactive effect. It helps me calm down. Is that correct?
Yeah. When you combine CBD and THC together in an entourage effect, it's interesting because THC doesn't bind directly to the CB1 receptor, also known as the THC receptor, because it's identical. But what it does is when CBD is in conjunction with THC, CBD binds off site, and it allows THC to not produce that very intense, high that some patients can't function properly on during the day.
Right.
So that's why when you have everything in, natural state, it's going to provide a balanced, full body approach.
Sure. And terpenes actually enhance the medical benefits of cannabis, which is interesting. Cannabis contains cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, and that's what the plant is really made up of. Now, what's interesting is you mentioned earlier about how CBD and THC really interact with the CB1 and CB2 receptors, CB1 and CB2 receptors. What we have found in fact, what research has found over the last couple of years is that CBD actually binds to and works with a number of other receptors besides CB1 and CB2. Very specifically, this is where the different cannabinoid receptors that you see here work with receptors in our bodies to be able to do things like help us regulate not only cell function, but our blood pressure. It helps us regulate our inflammation. It helps us over here detect, so they say body temperature that helps play an active role in pain and heat sensation that are here. It helps us with hypertension and that we have. This is where you get into the things where it's the TRPV1, receptor is really good to help with epilepsy and autism and things like that. It's a neurochemical pathways. And then also it helps with when you start having degradation of the nerve cells, cannabis will come in and actually coat those cells and actually help them. And what's interesting is there's derivations here that help as we know that are antidepressants, we know that are antioxidants and things like that. So cannabis is really helping not just with CB1 and CB2 receptors. We're finding out that it is, in essence, it is a superfood. It is almost a ultimate vitamin for our body to be able to help our body to be able to function and to be able to regulate. And that's something that we're finding out just recently. Where there's not a lot of people talk about it because it's brand new studies that are out and we're finding more and more that cannabis is doing for us. Now, one of the other questions that people have is, okay, I'm taking medication. So what happens with my taking my medications? Will it, in fact, affect a lot of the medication that I'm taking? Well, naturally, anytime you're taking any medication at all, we recommend that you consult your physician. We're not trying to take the physician out of the picture. In fact, we're trying to get them more involved in the picture, especially if they know about medical cannabis. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't. So a lot of the anti-anxiety medications that are out there really aren't really affected or really don't conflict with cannabis. We found that cannabis actually works very well with them. Now, what are the medications that you need to be careful of? Well, there are medications that have to do with blood and heart rate over here. So these are where the Xanaxes come into place. And so where you have to be very, very careful, the Ambiens and those types of things, Marplan and that type of stuff. This is where your blood pressure, your heart rate is being affected. So because cannabis is distributed through your bloodstream, the endocannabinoids travel through your bloodstream, really it can have effect on these. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take cannabis if you're taking one of these medications. All it means is that you have to adjust your dosage of both that medication and the cannabis to make sure it fits directly. So if you are on blood thinners, if you are on heart medication, talk to your doctor, talk to your medical cannabis doctor, and they'll be able to help you get the formula, the actual medication, the actual dosage that you really need to be able to address your situation. If you have a doctor that doesn't know about medical cannabis, let us know. We'll put you in touch with a doctor that can help you be able to get that right. But there's many patients that do use heart rate and blood pressure medications and cannabis. We just got to make sure we're doing it correctly to not cause a problem with it going down the road. It's there. So Liz, there's many examples of people that have lived with stress and anxiety using cannabis. Here's a couple of them here. Why don't you pick one and tell us about it? And because I think it's important for people to understand you're not alone. And this is something that people see all the time and have used cannabis to be able to address various conditions.
Yeah. So let's look at Carter. So Carter budgets her income very carefully, but is constantly afraid of an emergency or an unexpected cost emptying her bank account, which is, very normal for most people. It's just the worry about money and looking at it in a negative perspective, which never helps. So her fear keeps her from visiting the doctor when she is sick, going anywhere with friends, traveling to visit her family, etc. Carter feels overwhelmed and often sore and nauseated. And that just goes to show that your mind and, your physical health is so connected, so all of these thoughts in her head are affecting her physical health too. And kind of just like the endocannabinoid system, everything is connected into one. So, and it's hard for her to focus on anything without being caught up in the negative possibilities. So, she has an anxiety disorder, and many of the things she worries about or would be real problems. Let me just see what this says.
I have a number of folks that I work with and that I know, just people I know in neighborhoods and in my social circle that have this condition. And we've talked about using medical cannabis. In fact, I was on a call today with a friend of mine who has this particular issue, and he has been able to really manage his anxiety and put himself in he calls it, I got my life back. He's now enjoying life again rather than living with the ultimate gloom that he's been able to see. So there are examples of having this work, and it's something we really need to take a look at. I'm not going to go through each of these examples, but I want people to understand where there are more examples that are out there. In the next couple of weeks, you'll get an email from us. We're going to introduce a site called I Got My Life Back, igmlb.com, where we're going to have testimonials to be able to see, to be able to realize you're not only not alone, but other people have used medical cannabis to be able to help them with their particular condition, especially if it's close to what you're doing as well, your particular condition that's there. So, but let's talk about the real important part of cannabis, and that is terpenes. Because terpenes are really the medical property within cannabis. We hear a lot about, everybody talks about cannabinoids, and they want to pick up this cannabinoid and that cannabinoid. But in reality, that cannabinoid does address the receptor, but what it's delivering is a terpene that helps with various situations. And terpenes are part of the plant. This is where the aroma of the plant. This is where you can actually smell it. You can actually, when people smell cannabis, they can smell a lavender or a citrus smell. But Liz, tell me something. Tell me about terpenes, because they're very important. I think the key to medical cannabis is getting the terpenes right.
Yeah. So being, into plant-based health and nutrition and healing, all of this makes sense to me. So getting into the cannabis world and learning about cannabis and how it affects the body, when I learned about terpenes, I was like, oh my gosh, this all makes sense. So if you look at, the terpenes that are listed, for example, you'll see limonene. So limonene is found in lemons and all of those uplifting fruits and plants and herbs and whatnot. So when you smell a lemon, naturally it uplifts you, it elevates you. And that is a very similar, if not the same effect that it does when using it in conjunction with cannabis. So limonene has many different potential effects. And it's actually—
What you're telling me is if I have a particular medical condition, let's say I'm trying to relieve stress, and I go into Move and I talk to the person behind the counter. I think you call them bud tenders, right?
Yes, we call them med tenders.
Anyway, and they could turn you on to something, onto a product that has limonene in it, which will help with stress. In fact, the question I had when I first went to my first time I went to a cannabis dispensary was I described my condition, and of course you look behind the bud tender and there's thousands, let's just say thousands. There's a lot of products, and they turned around and said, "Here's the product that you need." And the first time I went, I didn't have the heart to bring it up. But the second time, I actually looked at them and said, "How do you know what to pick out of all these products for my particular conditions?" And they looked at me and said, "It's in your terpene profile. The terpenes tell us which product you should be using."
Exactly.
That is very, very important. A lot of people think it's the strain, but it's not the strain as much as it's the terpene.
Strains are mainly just names, which, get your attention. There are interesting, some funky names out there for sure. But I also love to tell patients whenever I do like a doctor pop-up day, I'll, set up a table, I'll provide swag and a bunch of educational materials, and I'll talk to the patients one-on-one. And I love speaking to new patients because a lot of the time they don't know anything. They just know, it's therapeutic and it's natural and it's effective and it's safe, so, and I'll open my cannabis guide and I'll take them through it, and, I'll kind of get a good understanding of what their ailments are. And what I'll do is, when I go through our terpene profile sheet, I'll go through where they're also found in. So what we have at Move is we have this huge list, and it shows you a category about where they're also found in. So I say,
we're gonna show that in just a moment. So we'll actually show that in just a moment. But it's really key because things like myrcene, which are great for inflammation, are really something that are in a lot of different products. Linalool, for example, does a lot to help with. You can imagine it's very similar to lavender. It's very sedative. That's out there. I do want to point out pinene, which is one of the more prevalent terpenes you find in cannabis. Helps with, it's not only for anti-anxiety and analgesic, but also it's anti-inflammatory. A word of caution: if you have PTS, be careful with pinene because it does help bring back memories, and that's something that we really want to take a look at. So a lot of PTS patients, I don't recommend a pinene-based terpene. It's out there. But I especially love things like eucalyptol because this is the one that helps me with blood pressure, for example. It helps me with sinus infections and those kinds of things. So really interesting. Now, you mentioned that going into a Move dispensary, the question is, what product do I buy? Well, what's interesting is these are the different terpenes that are here. These are the effects that those terpenes have, the aromas, and of course, here are the strains that they're found in. So what's interesting is by being able to go in and say, I have this particular condition, can you help me? What they're able to do is they're able to say, gee, I can look at this terpene profile here. There's another set of terpenes for myrcene and limonene, for example, and they'll be able to recommend a product based on the strains that are for you. And I think this is Move is one of the few dispensaries that really put this up front and make it available to their patients and really use it as a guide to be able to help you with the medical properties that you need. I hear about people who buy products and it doesn't help them all the time. And when you go back and you look at what's going on, it's because they bought a product that doesn't have the right terpene profile.
The possibilities are endless with cannabis. There's so many compounds and so many different medicines, which is why you call it the full medicine cabinet medicine.
Right.
If I said that right. So it's exciting.
And being able to get your once you understand which terpene profile is good for you as a patient, it's that you're able to pick your products and they'll be more effective. That's what's really, really key.
Yeah, it really is.
So, and this is a list of now we call these cultivars. And what is a cultivar? A cultivar is the fingerprint. What is that designed to do? So if you take a look at things like ACDC, which has these terpenes in there, it's a CBD dominant product. What does it try to do? It's trying to bring patients relief, physical relief, and really help them stay sharp and stay focused and more productive. So you can see that each of the profiles, what we call the fingerprints, are based on the terpenes and also based on the actual strain itself that helps you be able to deliver that. And these are the products that you find in the store. I found it always interesting. People ask, why do they have these funky names? And that comes from the culture when, technically cannabis is still illegal, but before there was medical cannabis and states made it legal, this was the way a lot of growers could have products and really throw off the police and the people that were trying to control it by not, you call it purple Urkel, they don't know what you're talking about, but it's something that, so these names kind of took off as kind of a, how should I say, it's kind of a terminology that's used in the industry that's out there. So football has its terminology. I played golf. Golf has its terminology. It's the same kind of thing. But here's some cannabis. One of the questions that came up is what strains should I be looking for? And here's a guide that we'll be able to provide. And again, after this webinar, you'll get an email that'll have a copy of this presentation, and you can actually look up and actually get these guides that are there, that are out there. Now, how do I take it? So I decide I'm going to try medical cannabis. I'm going to try to address my anxiety and stress. There's a number of different ways that I can do that. Liz, you want to walk us through a few of these?
Yeah, so you'll see we have Move products listed with visuals, which is amazing. I love the visuals. So you'll see we have a wide variety of different ways you can, use cannabis and deliver it throughout your body. So oral, we have a wide variety of edibles. You name an edible idea, we probably have it. So do you want me to go in depth on, how edibles work, or more just,
No, I think the fact is, here's what's interesting about this. Let's start with that. Let's start with the edibles as one of the options that are out there. We know that edibles take anywhere to have it work takes between 30 minutes to 2 hours. Let's be real clear. A lot of people take a gummy. They don't feel anything after 30 minutes. We have a saying in the industry that about the time that you think it's not working and you take another one is about the time it starts working. And there's famous stories of people that take take too much because they didn't wait that hour or that 2 hours. Oral gummies and things don't work very quickly. Just be aware. They do work. And when they do work, they have a longer duration. In other words, they work 4 to 10 hours, which is great. What do I like orals for? I'm a chocoholic. And before I go to bed every night, probably an hour before bed, I grab a little piece of chocolate, a cannabis chocolate. And what it does, it helps me sleep throughout the night because it gives me that 8 hours of duration that I need to be able to get some sleep. Now, I take it about an hour before I go to bed because I find that's when it kicks in after about an hour. But I don't take 2 because then I will be out for the night. I mean, really out for the night. So the oral is very effective. Sublingual is probably the best way that people get introduced into cannabis. It's a liquid that you put actually under your tongue or in your mouth.
Yeah.
Swish it around. It works between 15 to 30 minutes. In my case, it works in about 20 minutes. And it works for about 4 to 6 hours that's out there. So it's very, very effective to help me be able to, in my particular case, I'm addressing inflammation and pain. I have 7 herniated discs in my neck. And it's really important that I get that inflammation down. Otherwise, the pain would be too much for me to really function on a daily basis. Inhalation is interesting because this is where you get your flower, your inhalers, your vape pens, your concentrates, and they work almost immediately because that vapor goes into your lungs, that lung goes directly into your bloodstream. And you might say, well, is it sensitive to the lungs? We know we've used inhalers for a long time to treat different lung conditions. And cannabis actually helps the lungs. It doesn't irritate the lungs like cigarette smoking or things like that does. Now, what do we have to be careful of? What I find fascinating is a lot of people will say, well, I'll just smoke a joint and it'll work. Well, the minute you take a joint, you add that 500-degree temperature and you light the end of the joint, what you've done is you've killed off half of the cannabinoids, all the flavonoids, and all the terpenes in that particular joint. And what's fascinating is even though you've taken about half of the medical properties of that product away, it still is extremely effective. It still works. That's what I find interesting. Imagine if you didn't have to restrict it, it would be greater. And that's why concentrates and vape pens come into play, because they let you set the temperature. In my particular case, when I use flower, I have a device that lets me set the temperature at 360 degrees. So I'm not burning off anything. What I'm doing is that particular device warms it up to that degree, and it gives me the terpenes, and it gives me the flavonoids that I have in that particular flower plant. So there are ways of being able to do that. And of course, topicals are very, very effective. They really go on the skin. And we'll talk more about your topical at Move, because I'm very, very favorable
Topicals and transdermals.
Transdermal. It goes right into the bloodstream.
Yeah,
And,
mm-hmm.
yeah. And in my case, in my age, I need these. Okay. And it really helps when I overdo it. It really does help me with my particular medical condition there. So let's see any questions that are out here. We have a couple of them here. It was interesting is William asked a question. He says, I take medical cannabis for glaucoma. Every doctor I talk to says I have to be high 24 hours a day to have it take any effect. William, that's just flatly not true. I treat, I have right now almost, it's more than 10 people that I treat for glaucoma, including my mother, by the way. When I have her on a regime where I have some drops that I provide for her, it's a tincture drops that I recommended for her. She lives in California. She takes them every morning, and she takes them just before bed. And it's really helped her with her glaucoma. It's brought her glaucoma down to where it's just manageable. I have a neighbor of mine that had a terrible glaucoma problem. He was going to the doctor constantly, and I put him on a regime of CBD with a little bit of THC in it. And literally in about 60 days, his glaucoma levels dropped down to the point where he really doesn't have to see the doctor anymore. He's just going for checkups, not necessarily to treat his particular condition. Now, he is not high. In fact, if anything, I'm using a high CBD, low THC product to be able to do that. To get high, you really have to be a high THC product. So we'll do, if you have some issues with glaucoma, send me an email at event@marijuanaaware.com. I'll send you some information on glaucoma. But the interesting part is the answer is no. You really, if you're using the proper terpenes and strains, you can be able to do this. And like I said, my mother's not high. She's crazy, but she's not high. Excuse my expression. That's out there. William also mentioned, it says, most of my doctors got their information from the movie Reefer Madness. Amen. It's amazing. About a third of the doctors have not taken any time to look at medical cannabis. A third of the doctors have, and a third of the doctors just flatly don't care. So educating doctors is always a fun chore. But unfortunately, a lot of people have lived, our government did a good job for over 60 years of really putting out bad information about cannabis. And really what we're trying to do right now is debunk that and have people realize that there is there is a medical property that's here used correctly. In fact, it is better than almost a lot of the pharma companies and pharma products that you have that are out there. Now, Keith has a question. He says, where'd Keith go? I never felt them. He says, I only smoke it. A lot of people prefer smoking. A lot of people, that's their preferred method. Smoking works great. As we mentioned, if you look down here, it works immediately, and it'll work between 2 to 6 hours. Most of the time it works about 2 hours, 3 hours. So if you're trying to have something that'll last during the day, you really got to smoke almost all day long to really have that happen. Now, I recommend if you really enjoy flower and you really enjoy that, take a look at concentrates. Concentrates give you the terpenes, they give you the flavonoids, gives you a lot of the flavor. It's a lot less expensive, and candidly, it's a hell of a lot easier to use than trying to roll a joint. With some of my PTS veteran friends, we always have a raging discussion of should you roll a joint or not. They like to roll it for the therapeutic value of it, which I understand completely. But from the standpoint of usage, I think that vape pens, especially some of these new devices that are used, are really great that are out there. So I understand that, but you might want to try a concentrate. And some of the new RSO products that you see, especially that are there, really make some sense. Jerry has an interesting question. Says, I can't use CBD. It interferes with my meds. Okay, I have PTS. Every time I find it works, gone. It's interesting. It's interesting that your CBD interferes with your meds. I'm not a doc. I don't have your medical history. I do know that CBD would help quite a bit with PTS and help quite a bit with the inflammation, and that would do a lot towards helping it out. So it's very interesting. Jerry, do me a favor and send me an email. Let me know what med you're on, okay? Because I'd like to take a look at if there's any cannabis product that might be able to be compatible with it. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm just trying to see if there's something that might be here that we can help you with that's out there. Because hopefully CBD doesn't really interfere with a lot of, unless it's a blood pressure or blood thinner. You really, how should I say, it shouldn't affect it, but there are ways of adjusting the dosing and the products to be able to get it so you can be able to use it. So let's see if we can get you an answer, because I think it's something that could potentially help you. Kathy has a question that says, can CBD or RSO along with flower and or edibles continue to help with both anxiety and depression? Liz, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, in conjunction, she's asking
Yes.
if you use multiple, I mean, yes, because you're introducing cannabinoids into your system and they're working, synergistically, especially RSO. RSO is a very, very potent yet full spectrum product that could be used topically or orally. You can't smoke it or vape it. It's very lipid, fatty based. So, using that in conjunction with some other products, I don't see the harm. Unless you're consuming way too much, and
You got to be careful. What you got to be careful when you start putting together products is how much THC are you taking and how sensitive are you to THC? I myself, I'm not sensitive to THC. I also am not very sensitive to a lot of alcohol. I can drink a lot of alcohol and it really doesn't affect me as much as other people. Some people, I have friends who have one drink and they're done for the night. I have other friends of mine. As a golfer, I have some Scottish and German friends that I do not drink with because they will drink me under the table. But all I'm trying to point out is that there are what we really want to take a look at is we don't want too much THC because that'll take you over the edge and get you anxious again. We got to find that sweet spot, and that's what we're really looking for. So let's pay attention to that. And when you're using more product, be careful of how much THC you're taking because it could take you over the edge. That's safe to say. Okay. Clark, thank you very much. You're mentioning about, I know sometimes my pain meds don't work when I use flower. That is probably because, again, it has to do with, your pain meds probably have something to do with either heart rate or blood pressure and conflicting there. It's just a matter of getting the ratio right. And that's why sometimes not just using flower, but using concentrates can help you get that ratio right to be able to use them both together. Okay, here's an interesting one, and I don't know how to pronounce this, so excuse me if I screw it up. It's called Tacrolimus is the medication, no CBD according to Mayo Clinic transplant team. Well, that could be interesting. It's interesting. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm a practitioner, but I'll talk to some doctors about that, and I will bow to, and I will obviously. Mayo is really the authority in this particular area, and if they're saying no CBD, I will go with their advice. But I would also like to see more research in this particular area because I do think that CBD could help some way. But let's be safe rather than being optimistic. I think we'll stay on the safe side that's there. And so Jerry asked the question, where can I get terpene profile information? So many of the new products, Leafly doesn't have it. And that is correct. Leafly doesn't pay a lot of attention to terpenes. The way you get terpene information is literally to look at the COAs, the certificate of authenticity from the dispensaries themselves. Now, fortunately, people like Move publish all the terpenes that are in their products. And a lot of I know there's five dispensaries here in Florida that do a good job of providing terpene information. It is something that is hard to find, but again, what you're looking for, the key, Jerry, is to look for what they call the COA, Certificate of Authentication, that's out there. We will be coming up with a program next quarter that will allow you to identify the terpenes you use and which dispensaries have those terpenes. But we haven't got that out right now. But pay attention. We'll send you some information when we launch that particular project. And thank you very much for that question. Any other questions you have? Liz?
Question that I have?
Well, we had some questions that were submitted prior to the webinar, and so one of them was, is there a recommendation to counter emotional meltdown? Well, emotional meltdowns can really, the route of administration really will make a big difference as to what you can do to help you counter that. I know that regular sleep can help with that quite a bit. I know taking long term, take a look at consulting a therapist. They can be able to help you with that. But also, what you want to be able to do is look at something where you take we actually treat both the breakout of pain, and also you take a look at the anxiety during the day. That'll help you quite a bit. What my recommendation would be: stick to a terpene profile that can help you. Stick to a product like a tincture that's out there. There are patches that are available for people like Move that you can put on during the day that microdose. That you can get a 1-to-1, for example, or a CBD or a THC one that'll help you quite a bit. So it's something that's really something that's out there. One of the questions that also comes up is, what's the best strains for anxiety and stress? I think we answered that in the presentation, so I'm going to leave that one alone. One of the other questions that comes up, it says, what's the best way to find a strain that works? When I go to Trulieve, they're out. All dispensaries, whether it's Trulieve, Move, or whatever, keeping products in stock are always a challenge, because again, you're growing the products and you're trying to keep them in stock. But if you know the terpene profile, what you can do is you can not just say, I need this strain. You can say, I'm looking for the particular terpene profile. And even though it may not be in your favorite strain, it could be in a strain that's very much like that. So let's help you figure out what the right terpene profile is. That'll help you get the strains. You may have a primary strain, but you also have a backup strain that you like to use. I have a couple of those that I take a look at, and it's something that I do pay attention to. Medical marijuana can help with both anxiety and PTS, as well as my physical pain. I have a number of patients that I work with that this is exactly their situation. They have PTS brought in by physical pain, and they're obviously very anxious. And being able to get that anxiety down helps them not only live a life, enjoy their families, be a contributing family member, but also helps you with their jobs as well. That's something that's out there. One of the questions is, sometimes they use medical cannabis and it causes elevated anxiety. That's probably because you're using more THC and you've crossed that threshold where you're, again, using more THC than your body really is comfortable with. And so what it's doing is it's causing that anxiety. As I mentioned, THC helps with anxiety, but if you use a little bit too much, it goes the other way. It creates anxiety. So you got to find out what your sweet spot is. My suggestion would be continue to use medical marijuana, but use a little bit less of it. Take a little bit less of it. So if you're taking 0.5 milliliters of a tincture drop back to if you're using 0.5 milliliters, drop back to 0.25. In other words, use less product. And what will happen is it'll probably back that down and really help you with the anxiety that's out there. And when people ask what's the best route of administration, that really is depending on you. People really have a preference of what they'll use. Some people like smoking, some people like tinctures, some people like edibles. My mother is an edible person. We finally got her to pay attention and wait her hour before she takes another one. But the point is, there's something that she likes it because she can carry it around. She has it in her purse. She lives in California, and so she's able to keep the product with her. Kind of makes her feel comfortable. So I think I can't really tell you what's best for you. What I would suggest, though, is start with tincture drops. I would try, and then I would try some edibles and see how that works, and start in that particular direction. If you like smoking, there you go. And if you don't like smoking, you still might try some of the vape pens. You still might try some of the concentrates, because they are very cost effective, and it helps work right there. Okay, so I hope that helps quite a bit. A lot of the sleep and things, I'm going to leave those for a webinar that we're going to do in the future. But I guess the best way to answer the question about being groggy about taking an indica gummy is those indica gummies, as we mentioned, will last 4 to 10 hours. So if you sleep 8 hours and your body is one of those bodies where your metabolism really takes about 10 hours to metabolize it, you'll have about 2 more hours where you'll feel, how should I say, groggy before that actually happens. And one of the other questions is, how can I medicate during a workday? I need a pain relief to be alert and focused. Amen. That is exactly my problem. I have 7 herniated discs in my neck, and if I really over medicate, I actually can be very high. So I've spent a lot of time now. I've been doing this now for about 6 years, almost 7 years. So I know what my threshold is. I know when I know what too much is, and I know what not enough is. But I've been able to try different products and find that I can, in fact, take a certain amount of medication. It does help me stay lucid. It helps me be alert and focused during the day without getting high. And that's what dosing is all about. And really, my pain level stays below a 1, which if you've ever had herniated discs in your neck and you have 7 of them, they are very painful. So the answer is yes, you can. It's a matter of working with your doctor, working with a practitioner, and getting your regime that's down there. That's out there. Now, one of the things that comes up, it says, can you explain the regulations on what concentrates can be deducted from? We're going to do a whole presentation on terpenes next week, and we're going to do another webinar on routes of administration or which products you should use. I'm going to leave that question for those because there's a lot of slides behind that are needed to be able to explain that. It's out there. So, Liz, we've talked about what products can be used. We've talked about what works. We talked about why it works. Let's talk about where we can get those products. And this is where Move comes into play. You know, you have some of the best of class products. And I have to tell you, I work with almost all the dispensaries, not only in Florida, but also here in the nation. Move is one of the better ones. I really like the quality of the products that you put out there.
Yeah, we really pride ourselves in providing research and evidence-based product, that delivers like pharmaceutical level, experience. So we can.
One of the reasons why you do that is your founder was involved in the pharma industry, and he invented or he came up with this patent on what they call encapsulated technology.
Yes, this is amazing. I tell every patient I come in contact with about this because normally whenever a patient has been to Move, they immediately bring up the 72-hour patch. So we do have this. It's one of our products underneath our patent encapsulated technology. So how it works is cannabis or cannabinoids are lipid based. So they're fatty based and they love fat. So
right here, right here.
Yeah, so we have a really great visual of it and how it works. So when you apply the non-water soluble cannabinoids to the skin, they're going to be just that local effect. You're not going to be able to, provide those past that fatty tissue because they're lipid based, so they won't be able to pass that tissue. So what we do is we wrap these cannabinoids in a water micelle structure to where it's able to not only hit the surface of the local effect, but also surpass all the fatty tissue, which it shows right here, applied to the skin, absorbed into the dermis layer, and it is passing through that fatty epidermis, and travels right into the bloodstream for not only local, but systemic effects. So
and what it does for everybody, what this really does is it does 3 things. Number 1 is it helps get the cannabis into your bloodstream, gets it into your body much quicker. So instead of having to wait, for example, the 2 hours, the hour and a half for your edibles to work, your edibles will work maybe, so Move edibles will work maybe in 30 minutes to 45 minutes. So that's one thing. Number 2 is if you're using a topical, like you mentioned, the patch or a topical cream, it helps quite a bit. I know in my neck, when I put a topical on there, I can feel the relief literally within 2 to 3 minutes, where if I use something that is non-encapsulated, it never works. So you hear about that thing when I tried it. I think the third is that it is water soluble. So I can put it in my coffee. I can take those drops, I can put them in my coffee, I can put them in my tea. There's a number of things I can do with them. So it makes it easier for me to take them. I don't have to stick them underneath my tongue. And it's something that makes it easier to be able to do, how should I say, your regime, when you're looking at how do you take the product during the day, it makes it a lot easier to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So, and here's the different products that you have. There's different, what's fascinating about cannabis is it's not take 2 pills and call me in the morning. There's a number of different options, and that option really is left up to you as the patient. You are in control of what you take. Do you like chocolates? Do you like patches? Are you good with tinctures? Do you like to smoke? What I really like about Move is you have a metered inhaler.
Yeah.
Right? To be able to figure out what's there, which is great.
We have a meter dose inhaler, which we're the only company exclusive to Move that does have this inhaler. And it's amazing because it delivers a very, consistent dose of 2.4 milligrams of the cannabinoids. And you can, it literally is an actual inhaler. You can bring it to the Disney parks with you. You can bring it out in public without feeling like you need to, do it somewhere more discreet.
Sure.
So it comes in THC, CBD, and the 1-to-1. So lots of different formulas. Formulas are important. Those are sometimes overlooked, but that's a really important part about choosing the product is the formula.
Right.
So
you guys have done a really good job, and then you have a great evolved gel which you can put on, and that really helps quite a bit. I know that when I travel, I like using your cannabis gels because carrying the tincture bottle around me is a little tough. The gel works out really well. It's out there.
Yeah, the gel.
So, and what's also I like about Move is a lot of products that are made, they take the flavonoids and they take the terpenes out of the product. In your particular case, you either don't take it out of the product, or if you do take it out, you actually reintroduce it back into the product that's out there. And you really have what I call terpene-rich products. Terpene is the key to medical cannabis. This is where you get your medical benefits, and this is where Move has done a great job in this particular area of providing products in that particular space.
Yeah. A really great key point, though, about our edibles is that we do reintroduce terpenes up to 2-3% or so. So we do provide that distillate, taste-free, odorless-free effect in for example, our soft chew. It'll taste like a regular candy, but you're also going to get the botanical terpenes reintroduced. Right. So
and you also have, like I said, you now have an RSO gummy.
We have an RSO,
which is a major breakthrough.
And not to mention we have a CBN. So CBN it's not really easy to find, it's the oxidated compound of THC. So it does provide very sedative effects, and it is phenomenal for sleep. I've heard already so many patients that I've spoken to that have tried it have received amazing effects on sleep, So the CBN.
Well, all we got to do is, I know it's flying off the shelf right now because I've been trying to order it for the last week from a number of your local dispensaries, but it is something to take a look at. It's something to really look at. Why RSO? What's RSO? The big deal about RSO? It's whole plant. And so you're getting the whole plant that's working for you, and it's very, very effective. Now, that's the good news.
Yeah. Really quick, I forgot to mention, with the CBN gummy, it's a part of our Encore collaboration. The CBN is a 1-to-2. So it is a ratio of THC and CBN. So together, of course, the Entourage Effect can really, elevate those therapeutic properties. And RSO, what's really, really unique about our RSO soft chews is that we have a sativa and an indica. So the sativa is a mango and the indica is a crepe. And they're going to be depending on the patient, the effect is going to be very, very different, People, I'm excited to tell patients this. A lot of patients say, hey, I'm lost because I want to use cannabis, but I want to be able to function and focus and be able to perform these daily activities without feeling, too impaired almost, or too high. So what I tell them is, or what I'm going to, bring up is our RSO soft chews are amazing because you're getting the full complement of the cannabinoids, and the terpenes and the flavonoids, and because it's very, you can taste it too. It's not the distillate, it's the full.
That's the key. With the terpenes, you can taste the terpenes that are really out there. There's one question that came up, but I think we should answer. Keith brought it up. Thank you very much for bringing this question up. It says, my doctor says that there's no difference between indica and sativa. He says it's just a marketing device. Is this true? And do you know for sure? And thanks for answering your questions. And the answer to your question is yes, I do know for sure. Okay. And let me be very specific. If you go to, I've had the pleasure of going to Move's grow facility that's in Apollo Beach, and you walk in, they will actually show you a indica plant and they'll show you a sativa-based plant. Okay, they are physically different looking plants. Okay, so the answer is yes. There is a. It's kind of like roses. Roses are roses, but there are different. You can see the difference in the roses themselves. Now, when the genome of indica are plants that actually had a lot of terpenes that made it so they were very relaxing. A lot of the sativas had terpenes in there that made it very energizing. So when I got involved, or I heard about cannabis when I was in college, and when I got involved in this 10 years ago, all people talked about sativa for energy, indica for relaxing. Well, that's all gone. And the reason it's all gone, the reason your doctor made his comment is because we've learned over time two things. By blending some of these together, the indicas and sativas, we create something called a hybrid. And so you'll see in a lot of the charts, it says this product is a hybrid. And that's because they use a little bit of a strain that comes as a sativa strain, and they use a little bit of the indica strain to make that particular product. What's really key, though, is when they do that, is they also have a very specific terpene profile in mind, and that terpene profile is what helps create the medical benefits that are out there. So it's not that it's not a marketing gimmick. It's actually part of the components that are out there. Let me give you an example. I come from California, and one of my bad habits is wine. And when I lived out there, which I lived out there for over 30 years, I used to go to the wine. I got to know the wine growers, and they would have different blends. They would blend Merlots, for example, with certain champagne grapes to produce some very high quality champagnes. Well, that's in essence like blending the terpene, the indica, and the sativa together to get that particular type of product that's out there. It's very similar to that. You can almost call a lot of the new wines that are out there hybrids as well, because there are very few pure products that are out there. Even when you take your a Chardonnay, for example, not Chardonnay, a Cabernet, for example, it still has other products that are in there. Cannabis is the same way. What they're able to do is they're able to blend these products together for a very specific medical purpose, and we call that a cultivar. It's there. Okay. So we have a question here. Is Jerry asked a question? CBN and CBD, is there a difference? And the answer is yes, there is. Liz, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer it?
I can answer it to a certain extent,
Please.
but maybe you know more in depth than I do on CBN. I do know CBN is THC that is oxidized, over time, and that produces it to be more sedative. So I do know in conjunction with THC, it does, really elevate that effect, which is why we just produced our, CBN to THC soft chew. So as far as going in depth on,
So CBD and CBN are two different cannabinoids,
yes.
right? And so as cannabinoids, the question is, each cannabinoid addresses a certain set of receptors. And I think I showed you earlier about a set of receptors that CBD was addressing. It turns out that CBN addresses the receptors that relate to sleep more effectively than CBD by itself. Okay, so if you use the right terpene profile, so for example, if you use a myrcene and you use a limonene with a CBN product, it really does a really good job of just relaxing you. When it relaxes you, it helps you sleep. Okay, and that's there. A CBN, a terpene profile with like a myrcene in a CBN will be more effective to help you sleep than a myrcene in CBD, although both of them are still relaxing.
Or a limonene terpene, like lavender.
Limonene definitely does that. No question about it.
Oh yeah, really great sedative terpene as well.
Okay. So let's wrap up a little bit. When we did this last week, you had 54 locations. You're getting close to 60 now, right?
We are. Yeah, this is the time of the year, I suppose, that we're growing at the wazoo. So stay in the movement. We do have, if you go on our website, you can enter your email and your preferred location, and you will be up to date on everything.
Right.
Updates on, we do deals every week. People don't know, but we're always offering some sort of amazing 2-day deal.
My recommendation is, if you get into medical cannabis, sign up for the weekly, or sign up for the notifications, not just for Move, but from all the dispensaries. My wife is a Chico's whisperer. She is a shopper, and so Chico's and Macy's, and they all send kinds out. The dispensaries do the same thing, and they have some incredible, let's just say, deals that offer. And Move does a great deal. Almost on a weekly basis, you have some sort of a deal going on. My only problem right now is, again, you went out and you announced your RSO and they're out. Be careful, because sometimes when they have sales, they do run out, just like a store, just like a grocery store or any place that's out there. I do want to point out one thing. Move offers a one-on-one consultation. If you're getting into medical cannabis, even if you're a user that have been using it for a while, my suggestion would be do a one-on-one consultation for 15 minutes or for a half hour. They will help you understand the products that work for you. They'll help you understand what works for you, and they'll answer your questions. And you're one of the few dispensaries that actually does that.
Yeah, we offer a wide variety of resources, from a phone call to an email. If you don't want to talk to someone on the phone, you can email them, one-on-one consultations, and a live chat. So you can go on the website and there's a live chat. So, right on the spot. People want quick, they want it now. So we provided that for you. So, well,
one of the other things that came up, Jerry asked a good question. It says, why doesn't Move market the products by terpene profile? I think you do. When you walk in, that your guide is an example of that. I think the reason that when you walk in on the board, and on the board it has a list of strains and not terpenes, is because of what I call history. The history and the provenance of cannabis has been to talk about strains. Everybody talks about strains. And we've only discovered in the last couple of years that terpenes are really what you should be talking about and not strains. So it kind of takes a while to get people to get over that. Let's talk terpenes. I know they're talking more terpenes now than they were before. I know not only Move, but other dispensaries are now bringing terpenes to the profile. But I think it just has to do with it's kind of the difference between gas engine cars and electric cars. A lot of people once we get electric cars to the point where you can get them charged, like you get gas at a gas station, you get them charged. I think you're going to find a lot of people flipping to electric. I have a electric car, and I absolutely love it. I'll never go back to gas, although I do have some problems sometimes getting it charged. But I have to tell you, it is very effective and very cost effective, by the way. But anyway, my point is we're just on the cusp of doing that right now. And so you'll find that there'll be more, not just Move, but other dispensaries will be talking about terpenes more and more in the future. Jerry also has another question. It says, some vapes are really harsh to smoke. That adds to the choking. The answer is, yeah. If the product isn't made very well, and then you will get a harshness to it. I have found that, and I'll use Move as an example, a lot of the products that Move has been made with the right kind of products. Now, it depends on if it's been made with butane, made with alcohol. In other words, how do they do the extraction? One of the reasons why I love concentrates, I'm a concentrate fan, is I actually prefer concentrates over flour or anything else, is because the way the rosins are made and the hash is made, it's actually extracted without using any of the ingredients that create things to be harsh. So if you have a problem with harshness, right, I would try a rosin, okay, or a butter or something like that. You'll find that they're very, very smooth. A lot of the products coming out today, the waxes, the butters, and those kinds of things, get rid of a lot of that harshness. Flour still has a lot of harshness in it, okay, by the nature of the product itself. So I hope that it helps quite a bit. Michael asked a great question. What does Move mean, or what does it stand for? Do you know?
Move. So it's really, I should know exactly what it means. I know there's a little phrase that we do go off of. It means do more. I believe it's do more. It's do more. We want to.
I don't know what it means.
It's do more. I have to think about it.
And do I have to tell you? And Jerry, I might have to tell you. When I visited the dispensary, the grow facility in Wallow Beach, so this was like 3 years ago, I asked that question and nobody could answer it, and I forgot to get the answer to that question.
That's a really good question.
So Liz, your mission, should you wish to accept it, is to get an answer to that question. We'll put it in the follow-up.
Yeah, I can honestly say I do believe, I had to think about it for a second. Do more. We want patients to be able to, with the use of our cannabis products, do more and be able to live a quality life and be active and be engaging with their, family, their friends, and feel balanced, right? We all want to feel balanced and, healthy on a root level. So sure, that is our mission, of course.
So one of the questions that came up is, what is the best temperature for live sugar, rosin, and butter? So I'm going to throw a shameless plug in. Next week we have a webinar on terpenes. Please watch that webinar because we cover that topic ad nauseum. What's the best? Best equals, to me, you get the maximum number of terpenes, and you get the right kind of terpenes for your particular condition. Up to 300 degrees, you're not triggering the CBD and THC. it gets triggered after 300 degrees. What I use, by the way, when I set my vape pen, I set it to 365 degrees. I found that to be, for me, I get the maximum number of terpenes, the right combination, and I seem to get the best flavor out of that. Now, there are some people that, based on experimentation, they like to go higher. They like to go like 390. And again, that's up to you. And some people go lower. Some people like to do 320, 330. I found, in my opinion, I like 365. And I have a chart next week when you watch this webinar. I have a chart that has the different temperatures and which terpenes get triggered and which cannabinoids and terpenes get triggered at those temperatures. It'll answer your question specifically based on what you want to do. And that's, by the way, that's a great question, Joe. Thank you very much. That's out there. So, Liz, I do want to also mention, a number of people have asked, I'm into medical cannabis, where do I get a card? My recommendation is to go to MMTC of Florida. And the reason why I suggest MMTC of Florida is because they have 25 locations, but more importantly, they help you with dosing. They have a dosing center that you can call them and they'll help you get your dosing right. And dosing is really the key to medical cannabis. And again, I'll throw another shameless plug out there. October 12th, we're doing a whole webinar on dosing because dosing is the key that's out there. Now, one of the other questions that comes up is people want to try CBD, but do I go to the gas station and buy it or where do I get it? There's a lot of junk in the CBD market. And Nikki Freed did a great job of trying to clean all that up. But it's just something that trying to get ahead of that power curve is really, really important. But I think it's important that you take a look at getting a quality source. We created a store called My Botanical Wellness. I work with I work with over 60 different physicians. We took a look at all the products out there and we found the best products that physicians recommended. And that's what My Botanical Wellness has on it. And I should mention, if you go to either of those sites, there's a coupon called MMWW15 and you get a 15% discount for trying any of those. But My Botanical Wellness does not compete with Move. We sell hemp-based CBD products. Move is selling medical marijuana-based products. We're very low in THC. We're 0.3% THC or less. So if you're looking at using hemp to get high, not necessarily the way to go. But it's great for inflammation. It's great for anxiety. It's great for stress. May not be the greatest thing in the world for pain management. So that's where you need to get into the medical marijuana world that's out there. Bottom line, you're in control. That's the main thing about cannabis. You control how much you take, when you take it, and the dosing that you take. So you know that you can, if you do start getting high, because you're looking at where that therapeutic value is, or how much THC do I take to get high, you can use some CBD with it, take you back down and get you really to relax. You're not going to get addicted. Nobody's ever died from using cannabis. The World Health Organization has shown us that. People have got anxious, but nobody's ever died from using cannabis, either recreationally or medically, by the way, in both particular area. And be aware that you're not going to overdose. That's not going to happen. Your body produces the endocannabinoids. It knows how to handle them. Again, you may get anxious, you may get nervous, but you aren't going to die from it. So it's out there. And the entourage effect is something to really pay attention to, something that's there. So that's kind of the bottom line. Any questions you have or anything you want to comment you want to make, Liz?
Yes, I would love to say that check out our website. We have everything on there, from products to every location to shopping at every location. So you'll be able to see at, for example, our Vineland location in Orlando, you can see everything they have in stock, from new products to every delivery method. And if you don't know a doctor and you don't know how to access a doctor, we have a specific page where you can enter in your location. You can click the Find a Doctor button. You'll see it on there. Everything's very visual and to the point. Sure. Find a doctor, enter your zip code or your city, and you'll find a huge list of all the doctors that are, qualified to prescribe medical marijuana. So it's very easy. It's just going to our website and starting from there. And the more you learn,
MMTC is not a bad place to look as well for a doctor that's out there.
For example, that is the perfect example. I have an amazing relationship with them. We have, as far as in my area, we have Winter Haven, which we just opened up recently, our new Winter Haven dispensary. It's doing phenomenal. Mm-hmm. It is a drive-through. It's gorgeous. It's a drive-through, so convenient. So MMTC in Winter Haven. We have a Kissimmee MMTC for all my Kissimmee tourist people. We also have a MMTC in Longwood, another drive-through that we do have as well. So they're all over Florida.
And I like your drive-throughs. I've been to a couple of them here in Orlando. So listen, Liz, we're going to wrap this up because we've been at this for a while.
Yeah.
You got any final comments?
Thank you. Well, thank you first and foremost again for having me. I had so much fun and I learned so much from you. So I'm constantly wanting to learn more about plant medicine, and we're going to see so many new improvements in the next few years, just with cannabis. So thank you.
It's not just the next few years. I think also people are looking for how can they get help right now. And to be candid with you, the resources are there. You can get, you have your medical marijuana doctors. Why I use MMTC is because they have dosing support. Why do I like Move? Because you have consultants that you can get a consulting appointment. You have an online chat. They do help you with finding the right terpenes that are good for you. So again, a lot of the question of if my favorite strain isn't available, I can find another strain with a terpene profile. There's a lot of things that are happening, but it's something that really, really is important for everybody. I want to mention that next week we're doing a webinar, and that one is on terpenes, which is great. The week after, we're doing one on CBD, and then the week after that, we're doing dosing. So we have a number of webinars coming up over the next quarter to be able to address a lot of different medical conditions, and please feel free to join us. Liz, thank you for joining us, and thank Move for helping us.
Thank you so much.
But I want to also thank everybody who joined us tonight. We've been at this for a while, and I know it's been a long webinar, but really, without you asking the questions and being here, we don't really have a successful webinar series. But thank you very much for joining us tonight, and Liz, thank you for all the help that you do.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to doing more in the future for sure. So.
Yeah, and there's a couple of people in the background. A couple of people in the background that are helping, which is Lee and Leah, who are really helping us quite a bit. They're the moderators. They're not seen, but they're definitely a lot of the reason why this is successful. I want to thank them. I want to thank Alyssa Katera, who is the person who came up with the idea of this particular webinar series. She's the one who is really the well that we drew from. So thank you very much. And then one last question, Sherry, you asked the question, how can I find a doctor in Georgia? That is an excellent question. I know Georgia is right now in the process of, Georgia, like Mississippi and a number of different states, are right now bringing their programs up. There really isn't an effective mechanism to do that. There will be in the next month or two. So I'm going to keep your name, Sherry, if you don't mind. Cheryl, we're going to have a directory to help you find medical doctors in Georgia. We just got to be able to make sure that their program is up and running where they can actually register doctors. It's not a matter of just finding a doctor. It's a matter of finding a doctor that Georgia has approved. So we're in the process of doing that, and unfortunately, that requires a little bit of patience. So the tide is coming, but we got to let the wave come to the shore. It's still breaking in Georgia, but Georgia is there. So, Cheryl, thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and look forward to seeing you next week. Looking forward to seeing you at the Terpenes webinar, and everybody have a great weekend, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.